tūtawa mai runga, tūtawa mai raro, tūtawa mai roto, tūtawa mai waho. Kia tau ai te Maori tū ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, taiki e. E ngā rauranga tira mā, no ngā pito o ngā hau e whānau mai, haere mai. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Maori Tourism Panel. It's a pleasure to have you all here in the beautiful city of Auckland, right next to the gorgeous Waitemata Harbour. I'm Andrew Baker, the Cultural Development Manager from Air New Zealand, and it's my pleasure to be the facilitator for you this morning and for this panel. Let's take a few moments just to introduce the panel today. To my immediate left we have the Associate Minister for Tourism, Mr. Chris Tremain. Sitting next to him we have the lovely Pania Tyson-Nathan, who is the Chief Executive of New Zealand Maori Tourism. Following Pania we have Mr. John Thorburn. He is the Chief Executive of Ngai Tahu Tourism. And at the end, last but not least, Mr. Tupara Morrison, who is the Chief Executive for Ngati Whatua Orakei, Whai Mai Limited. The story of Maori tourism began in New Zealand. In fact, the story of tourism in New Zealand began more than 150 years ago in my hometown of Rotorua. People came from all around the world to experience the wonders of the pink and white terraces and the beautiful healing spa waters surrounding the Rotorua geothermal area. When Tarawera erupted in 1886, Maori tourism didn't end because Maori people, my descendants, my ancestors, had provided a level of manaakitanga, hospitality, that resonated so well with visitors that the guides themselves and the people who hosted those visitors became as famous as the pink and white terraces. And so today, it's relevant and appropriate for us to be talking about the future of Maori tourism and where we go to from here. So welcome, and I'd like to encourage all of our speakers here to give it their best shot today, Pania. There's a couple of people a little bit nervous, but look, we're going to get right into this. Just a few guidelines. If we could please save any of the questions to the end, we'll have a Q&A session where you'll all be able to ask your questions. Could we also please, just for this session, limit the questions from media only, and if you could please, media, prior to asking your question, let us know where you're from and let us know the publication that you or the organisation that you will be representing. That would be most helpful. For those of you who wish to ask questions later, the panel will be around for a short time later that you can ask offline questions. Kia ora tātou. I'd like to introduce now again the Associate Minister for Tourism, Mr. Chris Tremain, and he's going to talk to us about the challenge ahead. Kia ora, Minister.
Te hei Māori o rā, whātapai tawhi te kia tāta, whātapai tāta, whakamaua kia u, kia tina, tēnā koutou. Well, kia ora everybody, and it's a real privilege to be here today to address you here in the cloud and to discuss Māori tourism, and from my perspective, I guess, to challenge you, to issue a wero, a challenge to the future of Maori tourism about where do we take it over the next 10 years. Can I acknowledge, Andrew, thank you for chairing this, Pania Tyson-Nathan, John Thorburn and Tupara Morrison from Tupara. Great to have you here and be on the panel with you today. The proverb or the whakatoikia that I used to start my presentation talks about dreaming big, about reaching out for the stars and pulling them close. And the reason I used that proverb to kick off my presentation today is because I think we need to be dreaming big in Maori tourism and setting a real big vision for Maori tourism in New Zealand over the next 10 years. I think that the stars align for this now more than ever before. I think the demand for cultural tourism is on the increase. I think the ability for iwi to invest in tourism assets is like never before as we settle more and more settlements. I think the appetite from overseas investors to invest in new tourism products mean that the opportunities abound. In my opinion, as a result of those stars lining up, I think we do need to dream big in Maori tourism. So what I'm going to propose to you today is an idea, a bit of something to get the imaginative juices flowing. It's not probably your typical presentation from a minister, where we put a whole lot of stats up on the board about the number of tourists that are coming here, or the investment that the government is making in tourism. You know all that. Okay? We're heading in the right direction. So here's my scene-setting picture for you. Picture this in 10 years' time. A group of 24 adventurous tourists aged between 18 and 60 are picked up from their backpackers hostels and hotels in Rotorua by four-wheel drive luxury Unimog. They drive southeast towards Murupara on Te Ara Tūhoi. Just past Murupara, they draw into a local marae where they are welcomed as guests to the Te Urewera National Park by a short-form pōwhiri before sharing kai, tea, coffee, riwana scones and jam, maybe even the local honey. They are provided a packed lunch for the next part of their journey, a stop at the amazing Whirinaki forest for 3 hours mountain biking. They eat lunch in the forest and share stories of the history of Te Urewera and Tūhoi. Leaving the park at 3 p.m, they drive to Ruatahuna, where they stay on the local marae for the evening. The locals put down a hangi, share stories of the area over dinner, and bring out the guitar for a sing-along. The marae have utilised some of the Tūhoi settlement funds to invest in an upmarket backpackers lodge, converting an old homestead that was trucked in on 4 different pieces. 10 upmarket accommodation units with en-suites have been built close to the marae for those tourists that are not comfortable in staying or sleeping in the wharenui. The next day they are up horse riding in the Te Urewera, where for 6 hours they travel through some of the most amazing scenery that these tourists have ever seen, experiencing the local guides. They are told stories of how Tūhoi people holed up in the bush from the colonial forces, never signing te tiriti or waitangi. That evening the tourists are bussed to Lake Waikaremoana, to the newly built Eco Lodge, tucked beautifully into the bush, unseen from the road. The lodge recently won an architectural award for the most sustainable project in the Southern Hemisphere. Local Tūhoi people welcome them to the lodge with the traditional hongi that the tourists have learned as standard tikanga. Some of the group stay to walk the beautiful Waikaremoana track. Others take a day excursion relaxing beside Lake Waikariti. Tūhoi have invested in the upmarket eco lodges around the lake, totally hidden from view from the lake, which accommodate the higher value tourists. I mean, today we saw Ngai Tahu with packages on the Hollyfoot at $3,000 a day. High value tourism. The more adventurous of these tourists have gone pig hunting on one of the local sheep stations which abound the national park, while another group choose to work for a few days on a local dock wetlands restoration project where we harness that eco-tourism opportunity like never before. The bus continues the next day down to Wairoa, which has built a reputation as an arts and crafts village with a strong Maori flavour, together with an eclectic mix of artists from around New Zealand who now inhabit the once gangland town. The impressive Taki Timu marae has been totally refurbished. Settlement money has built quality accommodation on the marae, once again for those not comfortable sleeping in the wharenui. The hangi is memorable with wild pork specialty. And the Ngati Kahununu Kapahaka group are legendary, performing for guests before the guitar once again comes out and fills the sounds of the wharekai. Guests are encouraged to join in with an array of instruments available so that they too can participate in this uniquely Māori experience. The next day, guests have the opportunity of biking north to Gisborne or south to Napier. The Napier to Gisborne rail line has become Te Ara Heretonga, the East Coast Maori equivalent of the Otago Rail Trail, but better. Farming communities along the track have established bed and breakfast options for bikers. The hot springs at Morrison have been refurbished with a quality hotel and backpackers lodge. Did you know that Morrison Hot Springs used to be the second most visited location on the North Island of New Zealand? Chinese investment has partnered with local iwi to develop Morrison into a Maori health spa focusing on the Asian market. They have differentiated themselves by merging traditional Maori and Asian healing practices with a natural spa environment. Local marae have all built small accommodation units with en-suites to host the riders on the trail, north to Gisborne, south to Napier. Te Uku Marae on the Mahia Peninsula has built a reputation for its beautiful location and sunrises, not to mention the paua fritters and crayfish salad. The marae has been experimenting with week-long Maori immersion, language courses which are going particularly well. And the Mahia Peninsula, while still supporting farming, has a predator-proof fence erected across the mouth of the peninsula, making it the largest predator-free area on the New Zealand North Island mainland. Tourists have the choice of spending time working on the numerous dock restoration projects on the peninsula. As a result, Mahia, local iwi, have become world-renowned. To the south of Wairoa, local hapu have also come on board to provide jobs and wages for locals through the investment in accommodation at Raupanga, Tangoio and Mohaka. The Mohaka marae has become legendary for its kawai fishing, excursions at the mouth of the river, and Pahuera have jet boating and rafting on the Mohaka and have converted the viaduct into New Zealand's highest bungee and longest flying fox. Further south at Tupara, the private investment from Julian Robertson and Maunga Horuru is paying huge dividends with the release of petrels into the hills. That investment has already started and first commenced in 2010. His support of the brown kiwi recovery is once again encouraging ecotourism. Ngati Pahuera have also invested in accommodation at Lake Tupara, providing the place to stay before finishing the ride back down to Napier. Ladies and gentlemen, the vision of a few people 20 years earlier has created huge tourism investment on the east coast of the North Island, bringing jobs and opportunities where previously there were few. The investment has reversed the trend of rural Māori shifting to the cities. Te Ara, Hiratonga and the Waikaremoana experience are now recognised globally as one of the most uniquely cultural and environmentally conscious experiences on the planet. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a vision of the future, but it is something that I challenge the Maori tourism sector to start thinking about. This is just one example of what the future may look, but I think we have the capacity in New Zealand, the capacity amongst entrepreneurial Maori with the settlement process going in place to make this and other examples a reality. And I think they will bind uniquely into the fabric of the tourism product that we offer into the future. So there you go, something to think about, something that reflects on the proverb that I challenged you with at the start of my presentation. So whai te pai tawhiti kia tata, whai te pai tata, whakamaua kia u kia tina. Tēnā koutou.
Kia ora for that, Minister. Made me a bit hungry there talking about paua fritters and crayfish. Wonderful visions, and I also see some of the people at the back scratching down notes for future ideas. I think you'll need to get some IP agreements off the Minister for some of those great ideas. That leads really nicely into our next speaker, Pania Tyson-Nathan, who's here to talk to us about the strength and the depth of Maori tourism product. Kia ora, Pania.
Okay, anyone that knows me knows that when I give a speech I suffer badly from flatulence, so I have to apologise to my colleagues on the left as they're going to cop it. He mihi nui, he mihi mahana kia koutou, and I'd like to thank Andrew very much for his opening. We've been told 10 minutes. You know, the other thing, I hate all the cameras, but anyway, I'm here to talk, and you've got to excuse me in my notes, but I'm here to talk to you about the depth and strength of Māori tourism products and its importance to New Zealand and the overall visitor offering. But I want to change that to the depth and strength of Māori culture and its importance to New Zealand tourism and trade. I want to do this because Māori culture and Māori tourism product are not only important to New Zealand's tourism offering, but also to the New Zealand economy and the culture, the social and psychological fabric of our country. Māori and Māori culture are integral and the vital part of New Zealand as a nation. How often do we hear the hongi referred to as rubbing noses? How many times do we hear the haka referred to as a warrior dance? These are important components of our tourism offering, but can I tell you that when I came into this job 3 years ago, the basic premise of Māori tourism was our entertainment value. Many of the images were warrior images with spear and tongue poking out, and actually I'm still trying to work out how anyone thought that might say, welcome, we'd love to engage. With absolutely no explanation, there is no context. Many of the tourism for meal opportunities provided free access, for example, the marae at Tupara or a Māori display at a local museum, also free, and maybe a concert party thrown in. I read numerous surveys and a number of comments relating to Māori in grass skirts and grass huts, and whilst they momentarily humoured me, left me aghast that this was the international image of Māori. Like I'm talking 3 years ago, not a survey done in the 1800s. To top it off, there is little understanding from a cultural perspective about why we do what we do and or what the significance is of the many things we do. Luckily, we do have operators whose tourism experiences explain this very well. This lack of understanding not only relates purely to tourism, but also to dignitaries that come to New Zealand and whom are expected to go through hours of pohere with little or no explanation at all of what is being done, what is being said, just that they are having a Māori welcome. For some reason, we think they should be wowed by this experience. And let's be very clear here, this is not Māori operators who are keeping visitors ignorant. Much more work needs to continue with the centre in terms of the way we communicate our cultural norms and values. You may recall a recent example where a Danish MP, Māori Crarup, recently commented that Māori were uncivilised because of their cultural practices. There were comments made about Crup's ignorance of Māori culture. Whose fault is it that she didn't know about the wero, the pohere or the hongi? That is our fault. As hosts, as tangata whenua, as officials in charge of visits. It's the fault of all of us that we failed to help her understand what was happening, what it signified, and why it was important. So it's not just about doing cultural things and doing them properly, but making sure that our visitors understand the depth and meaning behind those things. The upside of this story was the outpouring on blog sites by Kiwis, Māori and non-Māori. The downside was it didn't need to happen. So here's the thing. Visitors want to understand what they are experiencing and in the context of their own culture. So the culture-to-culture engagement is purposeful for all. Whilst there is still a prevalence of stories in the local media of Māori being mad, bad and sad, we are thriving as a people and we are proud. In 2010, the Māori asset base was totaled at $36.9 billion. Nearly $10.6 billion of the Māori asset base is directly related to the primary sector. But the Māori economy is expanding into other areas: manufacturing, nutraceuticals, construction infrastructure and communications. The treaty settlements portion of these assets is less than $1.5 billion. There is a significant pool of successful Māori export enterprises. Equally, we are seeing a lot of new investment in new and existing tourism ventures and infrastructure. The Māori population is young, and predicted to grow by 20% over the next 15 years. We are better educated, we live longer. Cultural values are inherent and a unique feature of Māori business. Māori goods and services, including tourism experience, offers a point of difference that can be utilised and leveraged as a comparative advantage. Māori businesses and collective organisations have an intergenerational focus and strategic goals across multiple outcomes. Our experiences with delegations from China, South America, the ASEAN and so on have shown time and again that connecting culture to culture is extremely valuable and does help to position not only Māori but New Zealand. We are culturalising commerce. Conversely, for our source markets, the value of this type of engagement helps us both to gain an understanding of each other and how we relate. The level of engagement rises as commonalities become apparent. Respect and trust are the basis for relationships to develop and opportunities arise as the conversation moves to business. Consider these outcomes warm and fuzzy at your peril. The cultural connections work with all forms of trade, whether it's tourism, food and beverage, or whatever. It's about connecting first and then doing business. Now, for us as a country, we all know that New Zealand is a beautiful place. We have stunning scenery, fresh air, water, the works. It's a safe place to travel, and the people are friendly. According to a recent survey, the second most friendliest people in the world after Iceland. But there are many places in the world that do all of these things. We are often told that Māori is New Zealand's unique value proposition. Some say it's our remoteness. I say, so what? Unless we are all prepared to buy into a much improved and coordinated export sector strategy or action plan, then it is irrelevant. And not in my notes, but I'd like to mihi to Martin and Kevin and a whole group of people who are currently working on that at the moment. What makes New Zealand unique is a combination of the people, the experiences and the culture, whether it's Māori culture or Kiwi culture. An English-speaking visitor to New Zealand quickly notices our unique lexicon that mixes Māori and Pasifika words into the English language, kia ora, kai, ka pai, space, in New Zealand Inc., Māori Inc., and Aotearoa New Zealand. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa, and any questions, could you please refer them to the Minister?
Kia ora, Pania, thank you. You raised some great points there, and interesting to think that 150 years on, we're still trying to figure out how to tell people what a pōhiri is. Fascinating. That leads, you made some other really great points too about how Maori tourism has started from a really great asset base, and our next speaker, John Thorburn, hopefully will be able to enlighten us a little bit about that. John comes from Ngai Tahu, which is a large iwi in the South Island of New Zealand, and they've made significant investments into tourism product. And this again, I think, is showing how the developing Maori tourism sector is starting to cut across some very important players. So welcome, John Thorburn. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou, nei rā te mihi kia koutou katoa. I'd just like to acknowledge the Minister and my fellow panellists. The first thing you might notice about me is I don't look particularly Māori, which is true, I'm not. But that in itself, the fact that I have the privilege of working for a large successful iwi of Ngāi Tahu is part of the interesting story of Ngāi Tahu, which I hope to share with you now. And particularly, I think, if I can answer that question of how might a Māori-owned organisation in tourism be any different from any other organisation, perhaps that will be helpful. So, I apologise if we can't quite read the slides, but look at the pictures are great. So who is Ngāi Tahu? Ngāi Tahu is a large Māori tribe or iwi based in the South Island with 50,000 members. It delivers a range of services to those members, which I'll talk about shortly, and it has a commercial arm which started with a smaller amount of money as part of a treaty settlement and now manages assets in excess of about $800 million with property investments, seafood investments and of course tourism investments. So like many organisations, Ngāi Tahu is underpinned by some very strong values, and they define everything that we do and provide some guidance for how we operate. You won't be able to read those from there, but there are a couple there that will be familiar to people within the tourism industry, one being manaakitanga, which really is the value of looking after and caring for our guests in the most special way that we can. It's a very important value for Ngāi Tahu, but also an important tenet of the tourism industry generally. Another one that will be familiar is the one of kaitiakitanga, which really simply stands for the guardianship or the responsibility of caring for the resources that we manage and have been entrusted with us. And again, a very, very important aspect to not only to Ngāi Tahu, but also to all of New Zealand and all of the industry. A couple of other values that are interesting to me, the values of Ngāi Tahu talk about innovation and spirit and leadership. And one in particular on the end here is whanaungatanga, which derives from the word whānau, which really means being part of Ngāi Tahu is being part of a big family. And we certainly do whatever we can to look after our brothers and sisters in the commercial world, and we're not immune to the occasional family squabble. So what does Ngāi Tahu as an organisation get up to? The funds that have been earned from its commercial endeavours go towards sustaining and nurturing its culture and its identity. They have a range of social development programs, education, and of course money going back into that rare natural resource of the land and the resources around us, and putting something aside for future generations. Around about $250 million has been invested in these areas over the last 10 years since Ngāi Tahu formed following its settlement, so it's a pretty serious commitment to these areas. Which leads me to the Ngāi Tahu vision, which is something that I find personally really inspiring. It goes like this: Mō tātou, mō kauri, muri aki nei, which in English translates as for us and our children after us. And I think, for me personally, that's a really inspirational statement and one that I can relate to easily. And I think all of New Zealanders and all of the tourism players can relate to that too. It's the idea that whatever we do today will shape and define the future for the generations that follow us, and something that we carry around with us with a lot of sense of responsibility. So it's a great guiding vision for an iwi to have. So, who is Ngāi Tahu Tourism? Again, apologies, you won't be able to see that very well. But in essence, we're a large tourism player that clearly is part of an iwi organisation. We have reasonably well-known brands up and down the country, and we are growing to the point where we're very close to achieving 1 million individual customer experiences each year. And what defines us as an organisation? Well, clearly those values underpin everything we try and do. But what's important perhaps for the context of this discussion is how do we go about the business of delivering some aspect of cultural tourism and Maori tourism? And our approach is a subtle one. It's an approach, I like to use the word infuse. We try very hard to infuse what are mainstream products with touches of culture. Because we deal with so many customers, we have 1 million customer experiences, we try to give them just a taste of what a cultural experience could be, and perhaps if we're successful in doing that, it will inspire them to dig deeper and open up more intense cultural experiences that might be available in the wider industry. But because of the scale that we have, we can just infuse this inside our existing products. Now, some products that we have lend themselves to this more than others. If you can envisage, some of you may be aware of our product in Queenstown called the Shot Over Jet. When you're hurtling down a canyon at 80 kilometres an hour doing spins, it's not the ideal time to be explaining the Maori legends of the place, because people aren't generally listening. So we take a light touch with Shot Over Jet, but there are other experiences we have where we have more time to build a relationship with our customers, and we can tell much richer stories. And an example that I just might refer to is a product that we have called the Dart Riverjet Safaris, which operates in the Dart Valley just outside of Queenstown. It's a half-day experience, and this is a good example. I think the Minister made a reference to this in terms of the types of things we can do. Here we can tell stories around the legends of the lake of Wakatipu. This area is a very rich place for Ngāi Tahu because it's the original source of much of their greenstone or pounamu, which is a special tonga or treasure for Ngāi Tahu. So in doing this, we can share amazingly rich stories with our guests, which does two things. Firstly, it, we believe, gives us a little bit of a point of difference. It gives us a chance to tell a unique story. But it also speaks to an aspiration that Ngāi Tahu has, which is to keep its culture and its stories alive. And one way that it can do that is through tourism, because if we continue with the oral traditions of telling these stories to guests each year, the stories will endure. And this lends itself to, even when we make a sale of pounamu or greenstone in our stores, it's not just a sale like you would have in a normal tourism, a tourist shop. This is us being able to give a real rich story around that pounamu, including tracing that individual piece of stone back to where it was extracted from the river that it came from, and every individual stone having a story around it. So there's a rich context that we can provide to the even the sales that we make around our products. So this is just layers of subtlety, but it is a way of creating a sense that this is a different experience because it's a Maori-owned organisation. The other aspiration that Ngāi Tahu has is to encourage more of its people into the tourism industry, and we do our best to play a role in this. So we've done a range of things, but one program that was successful recently was a program with Lincoln University where we jointly funded a range of scholarship students in tourism degrees. So this is an example of one of our proteges of this. His name is James Tawa, and he's just recently qualified with a tourism degree from the Lincoln University and now working in one of our attractions at Rainbow Springs. And we have several of these people that we're nurturing through our business with the hope that one day one of those people will be standing here talking to you on behalf of Ngāi Tahu Tourism. So in the very short space of time that I had, that was an attempt to give you a taste of how Ngāi Tahu operates and Ngāi Tahu Tourism particularly. I know there's questions at the end, and I have some more material if people are interested. So thank you for your attention. Kia ora tātou. Kia ora mō tō mahi kaha. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā tātou katoa. Kia ora.
Kia ora, John. Thank you very much. It's interesting how large iwi are taking control of mainstream tourism operations and fusing culture through that. That leads us beautifully on to our last speaker for this morning's session, Tupara Morrison. Tupara sits on the board of Te Puia, which is a very large cultural experience in Rotorua, but is also now heading up Whai Mai on behalf of Ngati Whatua Orakei, who are the Mana Whenua, the people of the land here in Auckland. And he's here to talk to us about some of the challenges that Mana Whenua particularly face in large urban areas like this, and about the same sustainability of cultural tourism. Kia ora tupara.
Kia ora Andrew, ngā mihi ki a koe. To my fellow panellists, kia ora tātou, kia ora tātou katoa. Auckland's visitor plan for 2011 set the roadmap for reaching Auckland's tourism goals by 2021. Growing Auckland's visitor economy to 6 billion, almost doubled the size of the economy in 2010 at 3.3 billion. Hopeful? Yes. Optimistic? Possibly. Aspirational? Absolutely. It is this type of leadership that we need to ensure Auckland and Aotearoa New Zealand are well placed to take advantage of global travel trends and increase the yield from each visitor to grow productivity and profitability at the local level. Think global, act local. But for this type of step change, local means more than the administrators and regulators in Auckland. It is about meaningful engagement with iwi to achieve that step change, to achieve that stretch. Ngati Whatua Orakei is ready to participate in this conversation along with our Tamaki collective partners. Why? Because we all want to unlock the potential of our asset base, both physical assets and cultural capital. We want to exercise leadership through participation in this global sector, and we want to realise the aspirations of our people through training, employment and business success. Two overarching outcomes were identified as essential to Auckland's success as a visitor destination: growing demand for Auckland and enhancing the visitor proposition. I'm in a real unique situation where, as Andrew said, I'm on the board of Tupara. I'm from Te Arawa, but 6 months ago I took up a role with Ngati Whatua Orakei to lead their tribal development, which includes our tourism opportunity. To grow demand for Auckland essentially requires investment in infrastructure, capacity, connectivity and facilitation, aspects that make it easier to do visitor business in Auckland. Mana Whenua, or those who exercise traditional authority over land, are a critical part of that discussion as they bring a growing balance sheet that can be leveraged into strategic investment partnerships. As the Maori trustee, Jamie Tuta, who's sitting over here to my right, is discovering in China, access to cheaper capital is an opportunity to release land asset potential, generating more productive use of Maori resources here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Treaty settlements continue to drive the emergence of tourism potential for Mana Whenua through ownership or co-management rights of strategic assets in particular destinations. I'll touch on Mana Whenua again shortly. With regard to the second outcome, to enhance the visitor proposition in Auckland, Maori tourism needs to place its focus on value add. It needs to position itself as being of special interest to visitors through three key offerings, and they've been touched on by my fellow panellists earlier: uniqueness, authenticity and connection. Maori cultural product delivers these three offerings across the country. However, we need to build preference for delivery of Maori cultural product in Auckland as a major gateway for international visitors. This will then strengthen the value proposition and appeal of Maori tourism nationally. That statement isn't about competition amongst cities or regions or operators, but rather a call to collaborate and ensure we maximise the cultural capital that Māori have in Aotearoa, New Zealand. That we take visitors on an iconic journey of our whenua, our land, and of our moana, our water. What sets our cultural capital apart is the richness of our stories. Not legends or fables, we'll leave that to Hobbiton, but real life stories. Stories about real people, stories about actual events, stories about the coming together of cultures, uniqueness, authenticity, connection. And I think this media audience more than any other knows the value of those three components in a story. The sustainability of Māori tourism in an Auckland setting will therefore be dependent on how well Māori operators develop and execute a strategy aligned to growing demand for Auckland and enhancing the visitor proposition. But it will also be dependent on the early engagement of iwi in the conversation, so we can contribute to guiding and achieving Auckland's success. Which leads me back to Mana Whenua. No matter what visitor destination we look at in Aotearoa, New Zealand, the importance of Mana Whenua is critical because it adds cultural capital value not only to the destination, but also to the experiences in a destination. I was fortunate enough in 2008 to be involved in the Rugby World Cup bid for the Bay of Plenty Rugby Union, and had to put together a proposal to get games and hosting into Rotorua. And Martin Snedden was actually the head of that organisation prior to him taking up his new role here in TIA. We knew that we had all the numbers right, we knew we had the facilities, we had all of those things right, and we got the opportunity to go and present to Martin. What we always focused on as key to our strategy was our relationship to Mana Whenua. That in the Bay of Plenty we needed to come together, we needed to collaborate. We needed to identify that we have iconic Māori Mana Whenua cultural capital, and we took that to Martin. We took along with us some key kaumātua from each of our three regions, and we got them to tell that story. We got them to impress on him what it means for that Rugby World Cup event to come to the Bay of Plenty. We didn't need to tell him anything else. That told him a story. Equally, ATEED and Ngati Whatua Orakei are developing a very strong relationship. And Ngati Whatua Orakei touches TRENZ 2013 in a number of different places. You would have met the chairman of our trust, Grant Hawke, at the opening, where he stood in front of a picture of Tumutumu Whenua, our whare nui at our marae, Orakei marae. We're supported by Orakei tribal members who were in the National Kapahaka Champions Group Wakahuia. We're at stall number 1134 downstairs, Tamaki Hikoi, which gives Māori guided walks across Auckland's iconic volcanic cones. We have a tā moko artist, Kātera Mahi, who is in the Tupara exhibit, and there will be other touches that will be revealed over the course of this event. Finally, at the end of the week, we are hosting at Orakei Marae the Taniwha Meets Dragon event being put on through Dr. Peter Sharples, the Minister of Māori Affairs. I guess it's appropriate, having said that our cultural capital is all about stories, that I leave you with one. And it's actually a good story to tell because it relates to the arrival of our colonial visitors, and that had been predicted years earlier by a matakite or a seer. So it relates back to where Chris started with us dreaming. That seer was named Titahi, and the following tau parapara foreshadows Apihai Te Kaua's initiative in inviting Captain Hobson and his administration to relocate from Kororareka to Waitemata, the harbour that you see outside here. And it's been transmitted orally within the Ngati Whatua of Tamaki for almost 200 years. And it goes, he haha te hau e wawara e wawara. He tiu he raki, he tiu he raki. Nāna ia mai te puputara ki uta. E tīkina e au te kōtiu. Ko ia te pau whakairo ka tū ki Waitemata. Ka tū ki Waitemata I oku wairangitanga. E tū nei, e tū nei. And translated it means, what was the wind that was roaring and rumbling? It was a wind in the north, a wind that exposed the Nautilus shell. And in my dreams I saw that I would fetch the wind from the north to support the Mana Whenua at Waitemata. And the meaning of that translated into Hobson coming here is that the wind in the north was the Treaty of Waitangi. That the exposing of the Nautilus shell was symbolising the unfolding of a new order. And that I, as Ngati Whatua, would be supported as Mana Whenua here at the Waitemata. I think we can relate that to where we are at the moment with visitor experience. All our visitors come from the north, from Australia, China, Japan, United States and Europe. And that wind of the north is going to come here, and it will symbolise the unfolding of iwi Māori as a new order of tourism product and tourism experience, and that our dreams would fetch that wind and we will take advantage of it as Mana Whenua here in Tamaki Makaurau. Kia ora koutou katoa.
Kia ora tupara, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, we do have a few moments where we're open for questions. Again, if you do want to ask a question, please let the panel know where you're from, and if you could direct your question to that particular panellist, we'd be most grateful.